Hello and welcome to this wonderful edition of the EWI Technology Podcast. If you've had the chance, please check out the rest of the podcasts that we've been doing with EWI. They have been a wonderful learning experience for me and for the listeners out there. One of the things I want to make clear is that if there is any questions at the end of these podcasts for our guests or for EWI in general, please reach out to us through our website or afterwards. But right now, we're going to get started on something a little different. We have a panel today from EWI, and we're going to be discussing a lot of fantastic things about the manufacturing sector and how EWI helps and tackles those problems. Today, I have Alex Kitt, Logan McNeil, and Connie Lamorte here with us on the EWI Technology Podcast. How's everyone doing?
Great.
Good.
Nice. Going good.
Everyone's good. Everyone's warm.
Warmer than you.
Warm enough. All right. So, EWI has a very wide breadth of things that it does, right? It does a lot on the technology side. It does a lot on the physical implementation side of, you're thinking electron beam welders and resistance and cutting coupons and checking for fractures and metallurgy, metrology, all this stuff. But then there's also a whole side of EWI that really has to do with proper business development, standards, operations, and getting things to run smoothly for companies in terms of a consultation basis. Now, this group here, you guys are sort of like the gurus, I'm told, of the QC, QA systems world. Alex, is this true? Are you guys the gurus?
We are the gurus. We're some of the gurus, right? So EWI is lucky. We get to have a ton of gurus.
Yeah. Now, in terms of being a guru, I guess the first step would be, when would a company call you? You hear these catchwords of QA and QC thrown around. When is it time for a company to reach out to you, Alex, at EWA and say, I think I need help?
Yeah, we have a couple of ways people often reach out to us on this. One way is a new product, right? So you're developing something new. You've never developed it before. You don't have an established quality assurance quality control plan. That's a great time to reach out to us. Often when you're developing a new product, it's time to think about new processes, right? And when you're thinking new processes, often you have to do something more advanced, right? You have to take a new approach. You also have that opportunity to talk to your certifying authority and figure out something new, right? Once it's on the books, it's hard to change, but when it's brand new, we're able to get after it. Another point that we often see people reaching out to us is when something has gone wrong, when there's been an escape, right? And that brings to the forefront some new quality challenge that new systems need to be brought to bear to address. And I think the third point is, we're seeing more and more people realizing the benefits of digitizing legacy processes, right? So a welding cell that's been sitting there since the 1950s and no sensors on it, no ability to gather data. That's the third point of, hey, we've had nothing for so long, just getting a little bit of information can really streamline our process flow.
That's awesome to know, because I've been a part of large manufacturing sector for decades, and there's always a sort of an afterthought to QA QC where, like you said, something new is already in development. We should probably start writing this down. Or number two, something went sideways. We got to figure it out. Let's write it down, because at the end of the day, QA QC is a lot about documentation so that you don't repeat things that are bad, and you do repeat things that are good, right? Now, Connie, for you, how much is it the onus on people, in terms of a QA QC implementation of people on the floor, getting people trained up? And then how much do you see it moving into the more digitized sphere, like we talked about here with Alex?
Do you mean manual versus automated?
Yes.
Oh gosh. Well, it seems to be a bit binary, I guess. From our customers, I see a lot of manually done inspection, manually done quality control. And I see a lot of automated. It's sort of how the way that it got introduced is the way that it's still working.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the manual methods have been working so long, and they do work. They continue to do it, even though automating it or moving to different methods that have also been in use for many years are still valid methods, such as, doing the automation. So I see both. I see a lot of struggle going from one to the other.
Yeah.
That's also a point of I guess we could speak about that as well. But I've seen it both. And I guess it has to come down to, where did it start? Did it start with manual? People tend to stay there because it works. If you're putting in a new system and you want it to be automated, then, ushering it in with automation for the quality control or quality assessment is the way to go.
Now, in the past, Connie, most people who are in the manufacturing sphere have heard of Lean. They've heard of Six Sigma. They've heard of 5S. These kind of pre-built strategies to try to organize and create processes within your shop. As companies become more automated or seek automation, whether through desire or through need, because of the lack of employees we have in the world right now in these areas, do you see that it's the same mentality that goes from manual to automation? Do you take the same principles, let's say, of Lean, and you try to turn it into an automation language? Or is automation creating a new way of implementing QC that then has to go back into the people?
Oh, well, I can use the first part, but
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that Alex would have a lot to add about that second part in data management. But I mean, the first part for our customers, when they come to us and need something inspected or want to maintain quality, make sure that the quality is there, a lot of times it starts with a specification. So the specification doesn't change. When you're going from manual to automated, you still have to measure what they want to measure and make sure you're measuring it in a way that, is valid and is repeatable. So that part doesn't change. But when it gets to automated versus manual, and the requirements for, what to do as far as, the Six Sigma or whatever, I think Alex probably has something he can add there.
Yeah, Alex, how does the elevating of automation force the humans to change how they do their job?
Yeah, I think there's two big ways. So the first, when we think advanced QA QC, we're often thinking, how do you go from 1 in 10, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 inspection to 1 in 1, right? 100% of parts being inspected. And that really changes the game when you're thinking about like warranty claims. We can say, hey, we actually have data on this system that failed in the field, and we're showing that it was done correctly. It was quality was where it needed to be. It also changes the game on a lot of just manufacturing process flow things. When we talk about WIP, if we're getting 100% inspection of every part in real time, that eliminates a lot of these inspection backlogs we often get, as well as the scrap outs we can get when that one of 100 fails and 100 parts are going, unfortunately, to scrap. I think the second big way is the time to react, right? If we have to wait 3 days for an inspection operation, we don't know things have gone wrong, right? If we can give real-time feedback based on sensors on the line, an operator can make that adjustment almost immediately, right? They get that feedback in real time, they adjust in real time, and they correct the problem. So again, scrap out rates, but also the ability of an operator to take real-time action. And Logan is a controls engineer, thinks a lot about how do we even take that corrective action and not just do quality assurance where we're seeing if things are going wrong. I got those backwards. Not just doing quality control where we're seeing things go wrong, but quality assurance as well in correcting those things in real time.
That's what I was going to ask next, Logan, is, for you, now we are creating an insane amount of data, right? In the past, much of it was tribal knowledge. And even if you got put into an environment where there was Lean or Six Sigma or Toyota or whatever, or Ford FIFO process, there was the people that would have to train the next people that would train the next people. But now with automation, and you're talking about data being created for every single step of every single part, how do you pull that all in and find the corrective pieces in there and then turn those into a plan so that it's assured you can set it up prior to it ever becoming an issue in the end.
Yeah, I think something that has kind of been unsaid within all of this is sometimes the robot will do things more precise and better than a manual inspector, manual welder, right? So you kind of have to tailor that to whatever the application is. You're talking about all these multimodal inputs that Alex sort of mentioned, right? How can we actually distill it down to, is this pass fail, right?
Right.
Because in most cases, it's just thumbs up, thumbs down, right? It's not the
Did
range
you hit the
of
standard or
spectrums.
not? Yeah.
Exactly. It's not this range of spectrum, but that's actually where we gain efficiencies. Back to Alex's point, is if we can put it within a spectrum, right? We can see the upwards or downward trends of, hey, are we improving? Are we getting worse? Why is this? And then go back and correlate that. So that's always the challenge, right? Is yes, you have all this data. Yes, you have all this feedback mechanism, but can you really take action on it, right? Or does it really meet the standard that's there? And that really falls back into the manufacturing plan, right? It kind of falls back to where you want to harmonize your specific manufacturing plan with whatever new type of sensing QA QC that you put on the line.
So when you collect this data, you have the plan. Okay, let's start at the beginning. I want to process this through for the customer. I create widget X. Widget X is doing well. I'm starting to make lots of widget X now. But I'm noticing that every now and then a widget X comes out a little wonky, and I got to figure this out because for me to get to the next level or stage of manufacturing, I got to dial this in. I reach out to EWI and say, hey, is there, and I know how you guys will look at everything. Maybe there's an opportunity to automate some parts of this. Maybe there's an opportunity to work better with quality control of materials coming in. There's all these pieces that start coming together. You start rolling it together. And then let's say through your process of understanding the client's needs, the widget itself, and getting this up to the specs they require on every single one level, you realize that maybe something's wrong with widget X. Maybe it needs to be a different material. Maybe this needs to be done out of house or out of scope, and maybe there's a better way to do that. How or at what point, and I'll throw this one to Connie, at what point do you take this back to the customer and say, you know what, we're working for you, we're on your team, but there might be a bigger issue here if you're really trying to hit these marks. Maybe you got to go back to the drawing board, or maybe there's a redesign, and that's not necessarily your job, that's their job, right? How do you have those conversations and work with the customer for that?
Well, one of the ways that we like to do things is do like an initial, we'll call it a phase one, where we test out whatever the inspection technology is going to be in a safe location. We call it de-risking, but we tend to try to, instead of putting this into an actual production line or fabrication facility, we test it out in like situations and de-risk it for our customers so that we can tell those things up front before we've implemented
Get too far,
the entire inspection process.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's one of those things where over the years, we found that, our successful projects, our successful implementations like that occurred when we were able to find out these things as soon as possible. So,
Right.
that's what I would say would be the biggest thing to try to do to make sure that what technology you pick is actually going to work. You'll find these things in that first initial phase without having to, spend a lot of money trying stuff and then realizing, well, maybe that wasn't the best choice, or maybe we do need to have a redesign of the actual thing that we're inspecting.
Of the inspect. Now, is there other variations of inspections? I'm just trying to think, like, let's say I'm a customer in the US and I want to build, the widget, but in my scaling, I plan to sell it to France. France may have a different standard, right? Now, would they come back to you and say, you know what, hey, thanks EWI, we're running this great. We're selling 1 million of these in the US, but now to go to France, we got some changes. Is that something also they would come to you and say, we need to reassess this for international sales? Or, what would be your guys' input on that? And I don't know who'd be best to answer that one of this group.
I can start.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Logan. Yeah.
No, I think we see it quite often in the arc welding side, right? It's there's so many different standards and so many different ways to actually qualify your process, qualify the part, qualify the design, right? And so each of those aren't even necessarily iterative, right? I mean, you kind of have to have each of them done in a silo and then harmonize it at the very end. So I find that we do that quite often. in our facility. You know, we're doing lots of work on the ARC-DED side where we've actually helped develop those procedure qualifications, right? And just because you can produce a good bead and a good material, right, doesn't mean your post-quality inspection or your post whatever that is actually effective, right? And
Right.
so like that's kind of where I think it's almost a step further back in a certain way, right? Is obviously it matters what technology you use, but we really want to apply the right technology for that specific application, right? Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
inspection, whether it's what process it is, whether it's the high throughputs that you're looking for. And so that's kind of where I think we fit in really well, is because we have a pretty broad view across all the different technologies, across what type of data would be useful to know, right? And how you apply machine learning or feedback into that, where we, I think, can excel and help really speed up whatever customer's process they're looking for. And so in my perspective, it's really like, okay, yes, you need to inspect this, but why? Right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the reason for it, and what is the physical nature of whatever defect modality that's occurring? You know, for an example, in a weld, right? Why are
Mm-hmm.
you getting porosity? Right? Like,
Yeah.
is it because it's aluminum, right? Or is it because your shielding gas is bad? I don't know, right? And that's where we feel pretty good about. We're really good at making defects and making bad welds. You know, we've done quite a few of those ourselves, so we have lots of firsthand experience, but
Yeah.
also applicable science when it comes to that.
And you're
The only
collecting. Sorry, go ahead, Connie. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to add to that, like getting to those questions and being comfortable having your customer, ask you those and having this like really candid, I guess, dialogue about what's going on. We get to that by knowing our customers, and we have
Right.
such good repeat business because we do have those, those candid conversations, those questions, and we pride ourselves in being honest and objective, and we get to that point with our customers because we really know them, and that's how we can very early on say, you know what, the problem is not that you need this inspected. The problem is that you need to address this issue up here and earlier on in the line, just like what
Right.
Logan was saying, with something could be parameter development. You could have something wrong in your arc welding process. So
It could
knowing
be
your
staff.
customer, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but being honest with your customer and knowing
Yeah.
them really helps us to zero in and get to whatever the solution needs to be very quickly, and then have the high success rate that we have with turning over our projects and continuing to help our customers in manufacturing.
Now, as you work with these customers over the years, all these solutions that your teams come up with to help people develop quality programs and then follow through with them, it's almost like you guys are building a snowball, right? Like it's the data keeps growing, the examples of solutions keep growing within your teams. How useful is that data, for future customers to know that EWI has been around the block, has solved these problems in a variety of different ways? When you start having this data library, you become like the Library of Alexandria of automation problems. Then, you know, how useful is that for you, Alex, when you're talking to a customer and they're like, "Hey, you may have never heard of this problem, but we got this issue," and you're like, "Dude, we've seen it all." You know?
Yeah, I think making it tangible always helps, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can talk all day about how new sensors, new inspection, how automation technologies are changing the world of manufacturing. But those are easy words to say. Proving it is harder. And one important thing about EWIs is our terms are much different than a university. So if you come do work with a university, the university is going to tell everybody in the world what exactly they did for you. Our
Mm-hmm.
terms are different than that. Generally,
Yeah.
a commercial program, we're much more restricted in what we can share. Um, but we do have the opportunity to talk about many of the government-funded programs we're doing. And those government-funded programs both are stories, tangible stories of what we're doing, but also opportunities to develop new techniques that we
Right.
transition to the commercial market and develop those data sets that we can use on commercial programs. So I'll give an example right now for the Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Energy. We're working on new methods of qualifying additive manufacturing processes, right? So in this case, it's wire electron beam DED on the Sayaki process. And the folks at Lockheed about 9 years ago figured out, hey, we can use this process to make flight critical components. So structurally critical, this is actually F-35 component that if it breaks, everyone, it's not good, right?
It's not flying
go
no
horribly
more.
wrong. Yeah. So they developed the process and they showed that, hey, when things are working right, this component we can make at half the cost, a third the lead time, and it meets all the material requirements. So this is like great success story about the adoption of a new process to serve a legacy warfighter system, right? But to inspect that system using classic QA/QC, the cost just blew up, right? There was no solution that would work. So we started a program with the Department of Energy to solve this. That is working to collect real-time data to inform the post-process inspection, not eliminate the post-process inspection. So we're looking at things like, what's the melt pool temperature? What's the temperature in front of the melt pool? So that inner pass temperature. How fast is it cooling behind the system? To identify defects, failure modes in real time. So not the actual defects, but what the operator can take action on. Is the wire wobbling from side to side? Are we bottoming out on the bottom of the melt pool with the wire? Is our inner pass temperature too high or too low, right? Something an operator could just go to or turn in. So that's a great example of, hey, we can take real-time data, we can use that to inform and reduce the amount of post-process inspection, and we can use those data sets for other customers. So making things a little tangible, but also having things we can transition to the commercial world. So long answer there, but
Yeah, no, and it's valid because the technology is becoming more readily accessible to everyone as well. Things that would have been perhaps only available to R&D teams like yourselves and other think tanks in the world are now starting to be features on standard welding machines. I can go buy certain welding machines that I can flip to give me a joules output instead of showing me amperage. I can now dial in arc length to levels that was never attainable before to give me that pool dimension and depth. And these are things that perhaps people aren't even aware are accessible to them. So that leads to the question of how different is this whole world of data collection and usage now as opposed to even 5 years ago, not just for you but even just for the layman manufacturer. And I don't know, look, Logan, you try this one.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think the biggest challenge, again, I'm going to come back to this, is when you have the data, what do you do with it, right? Anyone can go out and throw a DAC on there, Arc Agent, whatever you want, look at your front end. But like, one, is it good data? I don't know that, right? Like, what are they doing to get that data in? I think is an important question to ask. And then two, just because I have data, can you correlate it to real life things?
Right.
And I think those two big answered questions is, yes, there are so many accessible tools out there and people are doing an amazing job across all different industries of being able to do that correlation, right? But when you got to meet it and make it work, that's the biggest challenge. And again, back to, Alex gave a great example about all that. I mentioned it is sometimes you need to make bad welds or make bad things and understand how those mechanisms form. And so, we're definitely seeing the explosion and people wanting to leverage these tools and use these types of tools. But I would proceed with caution, right? Because, there's only so much smoke and mirrors out there, right? But at a certain ways, the tools that are out there are growing easier to use, easier to access, and I think that's only a positive thing, right? To your point, it's going to snowball, right? And we're going to continue growing, and we're going to continue building that fundamental understanding and the knowledge of what's going on.
Yeah. Now, Connie, the customers out there, they're working with EWI, and there's a thought that automation makes things perfect, right? Like as soon as you automate, suddenly all your widgets are going to be perfectly welded, perfectly put together. Everything's going to be great because robots are amazing and cobots are, this whole world of automation is just going to streamline everything, which we know can be very fictitious in its rhetoric. For yourself, Connie, when you're working with, an implementation process or a management process where there's automation involved, how important is that real-time data that Alex was talking about? Because a robot will make 1,000 perfect parts, no problem, but it'll also make 1,000 wrong parts, no problem, and not bat an eye. It don't care. So how important is having that real-time data, that quick turnaround feedback cycle of information with the customer?
Well, I mean, the faster you pick it up, the faster you can continue to make products. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
yeah,
the thing. We see this a lot well, I guess most recently in defense industry, people want to increase production. So you can't increase production but have the same rate of inspection.
that's
So,
right.
you need to automate that. And the better you can automate it, the better you can say, hey, this is a terrible part, then the faster you can still continue to increase your production. So yeah, real timeness, that's one of my favorite words. And I actually do think that automation can solve everything and is perfect. So there you go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's us that screw it up somewhere along the line, right? We're still the weak link, right?
No, just kidding. You're right. It's not 100% perfect, but a couple of
Yeah,
things that help is, when you go in to automate something, it helps to have in the facility that you're bringing in this work, an insider, a proponent, someone who's going to be the recipient of the technology.
the champion.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so it's not just a handoff. I mean, the handoffs are great if you have a product that you've already put into the facility a million times.
hmm,
But when you're doing something new and novel or innovative, which many times EWI is involved with, you need somebody on the inside to be a really good partner to understand what it takes to bring the technology in, to do the automation, to go through the steps and the plans that you have in place of ramping it up. Um, so yeah, there are, it's not 100% easy. It's not 100%, hey, this is great. Automation solves the world. But
yeah,
I don't know. We're getting closer.
yeah. We're getting closer. And if it was easy, we wouldn't need companies like EWI. There's challenges there that you need help sometimes, right? There's
Exactly.
people you got to go out to outside of your realm. Like you said, you could have the champion. It's like working in any shop. There's always the people there that are better with the computers, better with they want to learn, they want to go to the shows, and then there's the 80% of the shop that doesn't care. They just want to go put in their 8 hours and get paid, and that's fine. We need them.
Mhm.
We need them to do their job, but you need people to be at that forefront to help bridge that gap. Which leads me to the question. This can be for any of you, but how involved does EWI have to be? And let's break it into three sections. The initial investigation of what you're doing, the development of the QA process. Like you said, often it's in-house. There's the de-risking, like you said. There's that whole working on the product kind of on your own to figure out the pieces. And then the handoff, which I'm very curious. Like, does EWI have to go back once a week for the next year, or once a month, or is it, here you go, thank you, let me know how it turned out? Because there's probably stages there that got to get rolled out in a timely fashion, right? So that's a big question. We want to break it up. I'm not sure who would like to start with the investigation part.
I'll maybe start before answering that, just to highlight
Okay.
how many people are involved in all of those phases, right? So
Yeah.
when we talk advanced QA QC, it's incredibly cross-disciplinary. And
Mhm.
I think Logan highlighted, well, hey, one individual can get a lot of data today, right? They can just turn on something on their power supply and start streaming out information. But it takes so much more than one person to do something good with it, right? So
Yeah.
you asked at the beginning, are these the gurus of EWI? And we're some of the gurus, right? So I
Yeah, there's
represent
many.
exactly. I represent our data science team. Connie's done things with sensors and automations that nobody's ever dreamed of.
Mhm.
Logan's doing things in control and automation and kinematic planning that are just out of this world. But when we do these programs, it's not just a data scientist and automations and sensors people. It's the process person who understands what can go wrong. Logan's mentioned
Right.
a few times, hey, we need data, and it has to be useful data, right? It
The
can't
right
just be
data.
data of things that work. We got to see all the different ways things can go wrong. And the process engineer is what knows that, right? And knowing that lets us pick the sensors that should go on the system to sense if those things have gone wrong, right?
Mhm.
And then having the ability to production folks hate building bad stuff just to train a model, right? So EWI doing that, right?
Yeah,
And like I
yeah,
said, we're
yeah.
very good at making bad stuff. And that's an incredibly important skill when you
It
think
is.
about how do you validate these approaches. And then, okay, well, what if we have to do some post-process NDE? We need the NDE folks to come in and say, here's the inspection we could do. And again, partnering with automation and controls to say, how do we integrate this on a robot and how would we do sensing? And then we need that salty quality engineer at the end to say, I don't believe anything you're doing because we're keeping people alive and we're only going to implement these things if they matter. So, across all of those phases that you just mentioned, we need all of those perspectives working together. And that's a really hard thing to do. And if you're just flipping on that power supply and starting to get that data,
oh, for sure.
We get worried, right? Because you can go wrong very quickly. So sorry, related to your question, but just,
No, but it's very true because it takes all types, right? Like, if you just developed a quality plan based off of the product and one inspector on a floor, you didn't really do much other than just create a checklist for checking. That's pretty much all you did is you just created yourself a checklist that we're going to check X number for this dimension and this weight or whatever, and then that's it. That's not really process management, right? So I guess for that could be a great question there. For the average shop owner, at what point does it go from I just need to check the parts that I'm building to I need to have a quality assurance program? At what level of business do you think you need to start looking at that process? Could Joe's Welding with 3 employees say, you know what, I benefit from this? Or are we looking at, 50 employees and $1 million a month? Is it everybody? Connie, you want to answer that? I can see you wanted to answer that.
I have a short answer on that.
Yeah.
When it's been in my experience, it's been when a specification or a new spec or something has been handed down to the shop owner, and now all of a sudden, it says in here now I have to use laser profilometry to inspect this, when in the past it would have been fine with a micrometer or calipers. So that's when I've seen, in most cases, somebody say, okay, I have to make the case for adding in some sort of formal QA/QC. It's usually been, mandated by their customer or, a government entity, if the government is the customer.
Okay. So generally these are created by the standards themselves. It kind of pushes people into that stream.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think sometimes we have to, right? And to Connie's point, when that requirement comes down from our customer, there's not much we can do. There's also when manufacturers, we think all the time about the time, quality, and cost triangle, right?
Yep.
You can't have all three. Some of these solutions allow you to start getting closer, right? If you're doing 100% part inspection in line, there's no extra time required to do that. It's just happening, right?
Yeah.
So now we're getting time and more quality than we used to have. We might be reducing our time, increasing our quality, and the extra cost is a fixed capital investment, right? So that's something we can start making money back. So I think when you think about a Joe's Weld Shop, right? If there's opportunities and you see your customer, there's a quality level you could achieve, or a quality certification, or a proof of quality you could provide that could allow you to stretch the cost side of your triangle while not moving your time, that's an opportunity.
And for Logan, what do you see, for your part in the process, like we alluded to, like the many gurus, when you're getting pulled into a project and they're saying, look, we got to find some fancy new way to do this, or we got to find the niche for this. How do you approach that and try to keep the customer's interest first?
Yeah, I am a big proponent of the KISS method. So
keep it simple.
Keep it simple, stupid, right?
And
in most cases, just from my limited perspective, Connie is probably the right person to talk about all the time. She's been at EWI and seen things, but in a lot of cases, it's pretty simple stuff, right? It's, hey man, we haven't cross-qualified these power supplies, and you try to run the same voltage and current on this machine with the leads being twice as long, right? And you're wondering why your process is different, and that's sort of in my perspective, particularly when it comes to automation, right? It's all about keeping it as simple as possible, right? You can add as much complexity as you want, but generally with complexity comes cost. And so again, distilling it down to those core elements, right? Hey, is my toe line of my weld look good? Okay, I just need a laser profilometer, right? Just take one quick scan. the 80/20 approach, it works most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, right? We love to get complex with the ways we implement things and try to do stuff. And don't get me wrong, I fall prey to that often as a scientist, as an engineer.
And
But
it's cool.
it's fun. Yeah, you look down and you've spent hundreds of hours reading the same Excel sheet and wondering what
Yeah.
you're doing here, right? But there's got to be a little bit of that feedback when it comes to, again, the process side, right? Hey,
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned in the last podcast, but I like my favorite anecdote is Tim Morse, and I'm like, okay, how do you know if a weld's good? And he's like, oh, you'll just know, right? And it's like that doesn't help me as
Listen
someone
to it.
who,
What's your problem?
yeah, that's right. That doesn't help me, right? So
Yeah.
I have to now translate what that is into bits and bytes, right? Numbers,
Mm-hmm.
zeros and ones, right? And again, thumbs up, thumbs down, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
in my method and kind of the way that I try to apply things is it really is. It's keep it simple, right? Let's find exactly what, because if 90% of the defects can be caught, right, with a one type of sensor, you don't need three, right?
Right.
You'd probably just need one. And so
Yeah.
just if we streamlining that as much as reasonably possible.
And there is always a
You-
range, right? There's always a range of standards. So it's not like you need to get to 100% all the time necessarily, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then getting back to Alex's point, it's all based on the standard, right? Are you required?
Mhm.
Does it matter for you? And I think that's where, as the owners, kind of back to the champion, kind of trying to tie that up a little bit, right?
Mhm.
The person who's actually going to be running the system or delivering the parts or whatever that is, like I can't own that as EWI, right? You know your product better than I ever will. And we
Mhm.
exactly want that to be that way, right? We want to make sure that our customers, when they come to us, they're coming to us because they're looking for outside knowledge of stuff they already don't know, right? And hopefully we can both learn from each other. I learn
Mhm.
a lot about your product, I learn a lot about your systems, but hey, I've seen this somewhere else. Like how would this fit within your overall flow?
Right.
And that's generally where the best innovation happens.
Absolutely. Alex, I know you want to add something. I can see you.
No, Max, you said, hey, sometimes I can hear it and I know. And just a great example is
Mhm.
almost exactly that. So we're working on an advanced QA/QC solution for ultrasonic metal welding of battery tabs. So we followed our standard script. We got our process expert in the room and we said, what can go wrong? And we're thinking about all these crazy sensors we could put on there. And this goes perfectly with Logan's Keep It Simple. That she said, hey, I can hear when a weld goes bad. So we said, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, that's the lowest cost sensor, easiest to implement. Let's give it a
Yeah.
shot, right? So we had
I got
all
a
these.
speaker I can reverse wire here. Let's make a microphone.
There you go. So we implemented all these great advanced sensors and a $1,000 microphone, and the $1,000 microphone crushes all of it, right? It does amazing at predicting good and bad welds. So
Mhm.
so
Now, out
sometimes
of
you can
the
just hear it.
absolutely, and there is things for any trade. Like when you get down to the tradespeople that have been doing this for 1,000 years in their craft, over the generations. I alluded to tribal knowledge. That it's something I just interviewed someone else. They were big about bridging the gap from tribal knowledge to modern knowledge because they are usually one and the same. It's just a vernacular difference between the two. But when you're looking at the the way people have done it in the past, I hear it, I smell it, I feel it. There's tactile, sensory things, but those sensors are what we're trying to duplicate with automation sensors, right? We're trying to find those things. The I guess the piece that's missing is that AI component where we are able to process those sounds, those smells, those feels instantaneously in our brains to create instant reaction. Now AI is something that I know most people are like, I don't really want to talk about it because it's like so far out there, but also here right now. So it's a tricky space to be in. Is AI on the radar? I'm sure it is. Machine learning, having, instant corrective results by machinery during the process, like you said, in line. These advancements, are we getting close to that magical, iRobot, Will Smith movie type level yet?
We're getting closer on the machine learning than the smell sensor. We got to
Yeah.
go back to the drawing board for the smell sensor. But when it comes to machine learning, it is really important to know what it can do and what it can't do. So we do a
Mhm.
ton of it here at EWI. And we like to think we're good at knowing what it can and can't do. So majority of machine learning algorithms are interpolators, right? It sees part of the world, and if it sees something that looks similar to things it's seen in the past, it can say, aha, I know something here, right? That is powerful if you can generate the data set to ensure that it's not seeing something that's outside of the world it was trained on, right?
Right.
And so to do that well, and this goes back to Logan's point about we got to be good at making defects. We have to be good about knowing what that space is that we build the data around. So we do a ton of identifying, okay, this is the nominal part of the world, right? Things looking good. And yeah, we have to take some data points here, but here's failure mode number 1. Here's failure mode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And how do we generate data that spans all of that space so we don't have to worry about our machine learning algorithm saying, I don't know, so I'll just tell you it's perfect. That's really dangerous, right?
Yeah.
The other thing we do a lot of is what we call uncertainty quantified analytics. And in uncertainty quantified analytics, the model is able to say, yes, this looks great, or no, this looks bad. But it also says, yes, this looks good, and I'm sure, or yes, this looks good, but I really have no clue, right? And that a model that's willing to admit its ignorance makes everybody a lot more comfortable, right?
For sure.
In applying it and also developing algorithms to support it. And it also allows us continuous training, right? So when the model says, yes, it looks good, and I'm not sure, we can go and we can do a detailed traditional NDE on the component. And then we can tell it, oh, by the way, when you didn't know before, that was actually good, right?
Yeah.
And it can know and
then you can
learn
narrow
and get
that
better.
down. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's machine learning done right, which is really dangerous because it's very easy to do wrong.
Yeah.
Is thinking about what's the space I need it trained on, and also how do I know if my model's lying to me or not?
Logan alluded to like the turning data into ones and zeros and bits and bytes, right? I took my first computer science class in 1987, 88. So I learned on Pascal and C how to
Whoa.
program, right? And then I remember going to BASIC, which was the big jump then, going to QBasic and learning. That was the first ones that started creating the if-then statements, right? And to this day, I've always, because I had that little bit of coding, when I look at the newest, fanciest robot in the world, like a Boston Dynamics thing is climbing ladders and carrying things and fighting, doing backflips and all this stuff. All I see is trillions and trillions of if-then statements, right? Because at the end of the day, everything is still if-then statements. And like you said, if you don't have the ifs right and the thens don't line up, the algorithm falls apart. And that gets very complicated when you get to machine learning because you're stretching that if then for about as far as it can go, right? In terms of the parameters on both sides of that equation. Now, who's been at EWI the longest out of the three of you?
Connie.
All right.
Easy.
So Connie, this question's for you then.
All right.
I just dated myself. I'm an old fart. So, I'm going back to Pascal. But in the time you've been at EWI now, you've been seeing these things evolve, right? Because in some ways, the bits and bytes are still ones and zeros. That's never changed. But on the other side, what we do with that, how we gather it and how we implement it has changed tons. In your experience, what have been some of the biggest advancements in this process of developing QA/QC?
Let's see. Well, I would say a steady advancement before I get to the biggest. A steady advancement is the sensors and systems that we're using to detect what we want to detect and to do the measurement keep adding more smarts to themselves. So we'll have smart sensors or onboard assessment software. These are getting better and better. And, different manufacturers are adding in the inspection algorithms or some of the coding right on the sensor itself. So right off the shelf, you still have something that's pretty powerful and you could tailor already to your specific situation. So
Wow.
I've seen a steady increase in what I guess we'd say what our off the shelf sensors and software add to it so that you can use it right away. And it's just getting smarter and smarter, meaning you have to do less and less work. Trying to think what would be one of the biggest advancements. I think, I mean, I'm going to have to say it's going to be, you know, fast math, which I guess would be AI, you know, and how we use that and how we implement that, and the variety of different ways in which we can go and grab that and go and use the AI.
And speed is everything when you're looking at these calculations that are just getting massive, right? The algorithms are getting huge. Now, I have an urge now to go off on a tangent. Who feels like a tangent? But you're talking fast math. Where's quantum computing in this realm? Because that's the fastest math we know right now. Is that on anyone's wish board in the office? Does anybody have any? Has there been any integrations? I'm just curious because, I mean, that's the push for the fastest of fast now, right?
Yeah, I think so. Fast is incredibly important when we're talking real time, right? There's actually a startup in Buffalo, New York, who's applying the principles of quantum computing to things like finite element simulation. So we've been assessing that as a possible route to speed up what we call integrational computational materials engineering models so that we can get them to that real time. Quantum's still pretty early. I think they estimate to run their stuff in a truly quantum way. We still need about 10 to 100 times the number of qubits on a system in coherence. So there's a way to go there still, but definitely some potential. But when we talk fast, what solution we often use, and we do a lot of this, how do we now bring not just the sensors, not just the failure modes, not just the quality engineer needs into the equation, but also the math, the ICME, the material science, the thermal models, all of this fun. And we really like physics-informed machine learning because I said before, machine learning interpolates, right? Well, what extrapolates? What predicts the future? That's physics, says the physicist. And bringing that into the machine learning world can make our models a lot more robust, but it's a lot harder, right?
There's a lot more to add in, yeah.
So we do a lot of work in developing fast analytic models, which are accurate enough, and then wrapping machine learning around the outside. So until there's enough qubits to take over the world and all of that goodness, we have other solutions that are working really, really well.
I'm sure you guys will be right on top of it too. So when you get that new toy, I definitely want to be there. So. Now, in this spectrum of QA/QC, I'd imagine that sometimes the most difficult part of the process to work with is the human aspect, because there's going to be an aspect of this where you may have to change some minds, change some, maybe the way things are done. And it's not as easy as turning a computer off and on. You have to have discussions and, and be very, I guess, honest and transparent about what you're trying to do. How important is it to have the shop or the manufacturing plant be on board? Like you said, we need a champion, but you need more than one champion. You need like a whole team to be ready to get the data and to work through it. And there's going to be a financial investment. There's going to be, probably investments into things, staff, maybe even people that you may not have expected starting this journey, but throughout the journey you're learning. How do you work with customers to work through that and to make sure that all the pieces are falling in? Like, Connie, let's go with you. You got the most experience. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Well, I can go back to my same multi-phase project answer, which is first you have to prove out that the technology you want to try to bring in to do the QA/QC is going to work. You got to get your champion, and you got to get to a point where you're proving it in, we'll say, in the fabrication facility as we'll call it like a prototype level. And at that point, you are, I don't use the term slowly because these phases can run very quickly, but when you bring it into the facility and show the people in there what it's doing, they get the idea of how that can be enhancing their job, enhancing their company's product, and they want to be a part of, what you're bringing in, the QA/QC. And then the last step of that whole phase, 3-phase project is, okay, now that we've proved that it can work, we've brought it into the facility and we're getting more people involved and accepting of it, then the last part is, okay, well, now it's time to run. So at that point, then you have the buy-in from the people and you've proven the technology, and now it's time to let it go and do what it was made to do.
Awesome. Well, and I think that's your process is a good QA manual for yourself to work with clients, right? Because you basically have to prove out your own process to teach other people the processes, right? Now, we're getting close to the end of the interview. I got 3 very different, specialists on the call here. I would like to know what you see for the future, not just for the QA QC, but for your part of that process, because things are moving forward. But what's going to be the next big thing 5 years from now? What's going to be really making people's eyes pop when it comes to this part of the process management of companies, of manufacturing, especially in today's climate when we're looking at all of North America looking to reshore, repush manufacturing, reinvest into these in-house products, which we haven't done for a very long time now. There's going to be a lot of all of a sudden panic to get these things up and running quickly and efficiently. So, let's start with you, Logan. In the next 5 years, what's going to be really blowing the socks off in your world and the world of QC?
Yeah. No, I mean, kind of tying back to that speed, right? But
Yeah.
it's speed at quality, right? I mean, that's what's really going to blow people away. We've got all the pieces here. We've kind of talked through each individual section and know that all of those are sort of converging towards a path where not only can we do this at speed, but we can also predict quality and take action on it, right? So, typically when you go to do a control loop, right, you can really only take so many certain actions, right? But with this type of data management, we've had neural nets since the 60s, right? But we're only just being able to leverage them based off the speed of our processing, right? So we can take all these multi-modality inputs, streamline it into that one little thing that we can then do control off of, and that can all happen at a fast enough rate to be able to be automated, right? And I think people are going to be very surprised in 5 or 6 years when we look up and we say, man, that's automated now, because 1, we have to, right? And 2, it's the way we're going.
Yeah. Connie, what's in your line of sight for that's going to explode in the next 4 or 5 years? What's going to really make a difference for you in what you do?
Well, I would say I have a prediction. And the prediction would be automatic deployment, something that would allow, the sensors, the things on the end, in the manufacturing line, easy setup, easy use, easy change it out. Okay, we've figured out this part of the fabrication process is going great, so let's add some over here. So something that allows quick, easy, user-friendly deployment. I can see it would be really cool to have that in the future. So I would say that's it. And also multifunctional, something that isn't just a one-off. So, okay, yes, it can do a couple of different process signals, but, at the same time, it might have in a camera, or it might have in some other optical means of doing some sort of measurement. Maybe it's got, 3 or 4 sensors all in a single little cube, and you just deploy those and turn the one on you need at that particular point in time. So as with all things, I think it just all becomes a matter of adding more dimensions to it. So the way I see that is your, sensors can, number one, do more things than they're initially doing now, which, let's say right now is one thing. They're going to do 3 things in the future. And then also, how do you get those in use quicker? And how do you, change to use the one you want at any point in time?
I love that, because the sci-fi nerd in me watches things like movies like The Terminator, right? And when they show the Terminator scanning a room, he's got infrared, and then he's got zoom, and then he's got, the highlighting, and then he's got the image outlining. And in reality, the nerd in me knows that's like 7 sensors. He doesn't have that space in his brain. That one eyeball sensor he's got is not doing those 7 things. That would be 7 eyeballs, right? And that's where we are now, because in our future world, when we look at the future, we expect one thing to be able to do a range of inputs to be able to work with. And we're not quite there yet. I think we're getting close. But like you said, that'll be a game changer when it'll just be one sensor that can switch or do at the same time more than one stream of inputs based on the needs. I think that's really neat. Awesome. And you, Alex, what's your future look like, or the future of project management, QA, QC, and what's going to be the game changer?
Yeah, I think your challenge around a lot of manufacturing reshoring, and our workforce challenges we have before that reshoring happens can go in one of two ways. It can be just the robots do everything, and I think that's not very appealing, and also is not very dynamic, right? We're still not to that point where you can reprogram a robot on the fly to be as dynamic as a human. What I get excited about is taking people who maybe don't have a lot of experience in manufacturing, but using human in the loop tools to inform them about the quality. Hey, you just did this weld. By the way, your torch angle was a little off, right? So maybe do better on the next one. And that solves a lot of workforce challenges, and also arguably can make the role of individuals in manufacturing a little more exciting, right? A little more technology involved. So,
what if we had the sensors on? What if it wasn't the robot? What if we wore the sensors and we had like a heads-up display feeding us back information as we're going? Hey,
let's do it.
Let's do it. This sounds pretty cool. I got a bunch of welding helmets and a 3D printer. I'm sure we could do something. All right, awesome. For the listeners out there, how do we get a hold? How do we reach out? Who wants to give the deets on EWI and how to get the work into you guys? All right, Connie, this is you. Everyone's looking at you.
No.
Yeah, everyone's looking at you being like, Connie, this is Connie's game. Yeah.
Just go to our website, number one, and you'll find latest videos of things that we're doing. The unfortunate thing for the cool stuff we do is we don't always get to talk about it because it's proprietary in many cases. Yeah. But we put up there what we can, and it gives you an idea of some of the cool things that we're doing and sort of the direction of the technologies that we're working on. So yeah, I would say go to the website, and we'll get you in touch with the right person if you go and contact us. Like Alex said, there's some very interesting individuals, all with some interesting mixes of experience and talent, and that combined is what keeps us going, what keeps us solving our customers' issues. So yeah, website.
Awesome. And what is there any danger in anyone reaching out to you? Like maybe Joe's Welding isn't big enough, but might as well call and see, or is it, like I've alluded this to a few times, because I think one of the issues we have with R&D companies in general is that most companies don't reach out to them till it's already too late, right? They've either gone down the line a little bit too long without getting somebody else's eyes on what they're doing, and I'd like to make the listeners feel more comfortable to say, if you are thinking about it, just reach out. And maybe it won't be EWI. Maybe EWI won't be the problem solver, but you don't know till you reach out, right?
Yeah. I mean, we're a bunch of engineers, so trust me, we're going to want to solve whatever problem somebody calls in with.
And all I'd say is, and I'll speak for Connie here, is, Connie has been around for a long time. She's met hundreds of people. We work with so many different companies that already have ready-made solutions, right? And we're not in the business, that's not our calling as a company, right? We're a not-for-profit, and our goal is to boost manufacturing in whatever way, right? So whether it's small to medium manufacturers, primes for aerospace, government directly, like we work across all different breadths of technologies, all across all different sizes. And if we aren't the right people, we will direct you to the right ones.
Awesome. And any last words from you, Alex, for the listeners to ease them into this world of QA, QC?
Just when Connie said we have a lot of interesting people, I think she meant that in the good way.
I do, yes.
Have been a bunch of you, and we all seem to get along great. So awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on here. I know that a lot of people out there always have questions about QA, QC and the importance of it and how the future will encompass it. And I can't stress enough that I've been a part of the process. I've been a part of the implementation, and I've also seen the great work EWI has done. So it's probably more important than you've realized if you haven't done it yet as a company. And if you are a company that has QA, QC implementation processes or has needs, please reach out to us. We can help. We can boost however we can. And like Logan alluded to, if we can't, we can find out somebody that can. So, I'm sure we'd find the partners out there. I want to thank you three so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. And please check out the other podcasts that we've done. Hopefully I'll get to Buffalo and Columbus again soon, and we'll rip off some more in person. They're way more fun in person, but for Chili Day in the middle of February here, thank you so much to the three of you for being a part of this podcast, and we'll catch you at the next one.